Well, good morning. Some of you would prefer to be sleeping, but hey, we're parents. Our kids wouldn't let us do that anyways. So there you go. And so welcome to our Parent Summit. Feel free to keep just grabbing food and enjoying each other's company. But yeah, I just want to welcome you here today. We do this again every 6 months or so, and it's just really exciting to see the way that the church and families are working together to reach the next generation for Christ. So we're so glad that you're here. Some of you here are parents. Some of you are aunts, uncles. Some of you are brothers, sisters. Some of you are grandparents. And we're just so glad for anybody who's here that has the ability to speak into the life of a child and influence them for Jesus Christ. And so thank you for being here. This matters. It matters a whole bunch. And again, we as a church here at Immanuel, we want to come alongside and partner with you and are just excited that you're taking this step today. Today we are going to be talking about navigating today's culture with our kids. And it seems, I would say I'm on the younger end of my parenting journey, and yet even me, I feel like the culture has changed so much since I was a kid. And so I'm just excited today for the topic that we're going to be talking about, and to help just kind of wade into our culture and see what it's like so that we can better support and encourage our kids. So other than that, I do want to introduce our speaker. He kind of in some ways doesn't need any introduction, but it is our very own Josh Peterson. Many of you have children that have either are the same age of one of his brood of boys, and whether it's Jake, Logan, Sawyer, or Cole. And obviously he's been married to Heidi, and our pastor here for our students for over 7.5 years, and that's no small feat. So would you please welcome Josh Peterson. Let me pray. Father, I am so grateful for the words that you have to speak to us today as people that care about the children and student in our lives. Lord, I thank you for Josh. I thank you for his passion and heart to love you and to help students love you. Lord, use him as your vessel today. Lord, make him your mouthpiece. And Father, for everyone here, give us open and receptive hearts. Lord, we come in here with a child or a kid or a student in our mind. And so, Father, I pray that as Josh speaks, the way that we can apply what he's saying and doing to our lives and to our kids would just be ever so clear. So, Lord, thank you, and we're excited for what you have to show us today. Amen.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
It's weird to be introduced to you. I feel like we're family, so it should be a good morning. A couple disclaimers. Number one, I am not an expert about teenagers, by the way. I just am around them a lot. So, I think sometimes when you come to something like this and they introduce the speaker, or you read the bio on the thing that they sent you to get you here, the speaker can sometimes be sold as this guy who invented whatever the topic is. I did not invent teenagerdom. I was one, and I work with them, and so I feel like at the baseline of what I'm going to do this morning is just reveal to you some of the things that I've seen in working with them. And but it's by no means the gospel on it. It's just what I've learned. It's what I've studied. And I hope, my goal is that it's just revealing to you and helps you go, okay, that helps me understand why my teenager interacts with me this way. The second thing I want to make sure we understand is we have to drop the us versus them mentality. We have to stop thinking in these very opposite terms of I'm an adult, they're a young person. I'm an adult, they're a teenager. It's adult culture, youth culture. Because the truth is, and we're going to talk about this a lot in this first session, the teenager's culture, the youth culture, is your culture. They drive culture. And I'll show you how that works. But it's so vitally important for us to understand not just the stats, but the whys behind the stats. because those whys are what continue to drive things like advertising and media, and what you and I are saturated with every day is driven by who they are. The number one demographic that all marketing firms look at is teenagers. That's the number one demographic, because they know that that's where they're going to sell. And you go, well, a lot of them don't have jobs, a lot of them don't have a lot of money, but they have access to it. And if they can influence their parents, then their parents are going to spend money that way. So my hope, my heart is we're going to come at this and we're just going to start not only understanding teenagers better, but really just understanding our world a little bit better, because it is so heavily influenced by who they are. So I want to start with this idea of culture, though, because that's one of those words that we throw around a lot, but I don't know that we always understand. And if you were to look it up in the dictionary, there are several different definitions. It can be used as a verb, as a noun. I don't think it's an adjective in any case, but there are all these different definitions. This is the one I want us to operate from for the morning. The behaviors and beliefs characteristic of a particular social, ethnic, or age group. I'll read that again. It's the behaviors and beliefs characteristic of a particular social, ethnic, or age group. So when we talk about teenagers, we're talking about behaviors and beliefs, because again, there's a why behind all the statistics. So if we don't understand what they believe or how they view the world, we're not ever going to fully understand why they behave the way that they do. It's always got to get to the why behind the what. Because that why, that belief about the world, the fundamental beliefs, shape our filters. Everyone has a filter. You have a filter, I have a filter, and our culture, right? If you go back to the definition, our culture, our age, our ethnicity, our socioeconomic level, those things are our culture, and they shape our filters. They shape how we see the world. Now, you've seen this, forget it, teenagers for a minute. You've seen this in your adult life in the workplace. Two people can be looking at the exact same thing, but see it very differently. Do you agree with that? And the hard part about all the filters that we have is that no one can see them. You can't see your coworker's filter. You can't see the filter of a teenager. They can't see yours, but everything is going out and in that filter. The truth is, none of us see the world as it really is. No one does. We all see the world as we see it, because our view is shaped by where we come from, who we are, what we believe, those things being our culture, which influence our filter. And that's why so often between parents and teenagers there are disconnects, why we don't get along. Because we can't see each other's filters, sometimes our intentions and the impact that result are very different things. Have you ever been there? You don't even have to have a teenager. This can be true of your young student, right? You say something, they go ballistic or have a breakdown over it, and you stand there with your mouth open going, that's not what I wanted to happen right now. And sometimes you even go to them and you say, what did I say? I don't know, I'm just mad. Because what you said came through their filter, so it impacted them as a result of their filter, not necessarily your intention. And if we could all get this in just the basic fundamental principles of relationships, I think our relationships would be in a much better place. The impact of what you say isn't always what you intended, because it always will pass through a filter. And that's why sometimes our kids can respond in ways that we didn't see coming, because we so often forget that they have a culture that has shaped their filter, which influences what you say to them. So this morning, I want to focus on three main areas that I see in the shaping of our teenagers' culture. And by the way, real quick, I'm going to use the word teenager a lot. I don't want you to feel misled if you came today and you don't have a teenager, because I have good news for you. There's coming a day where you will. And this stuff will be, I hope that I've gotten it to the place where it's going to be true over the course of time, not just today. But I want to look at three main things. They're not the only things. There are several things that shape a youth's culture, but these are three that I want to focus on today because I think they take priority. And they're these three things: media, sex, and party. And I'll explain what party. We're going to talk about substance abuse and some of those things for a little while. But I think these are the most predominant things. When I sit at a table of teenagers and I just listen, I'm not teaching, I'm not talking, I'm not even a part of the conversation. When I'm blessed enough, fortunate enough to just kind of be in the room, these are the things they're talking about. They're talking about media, they're talking about sex, and they're talking about partying. Now, a couple definitions real quick. We're going to start with media. I want you to understand when I say media, I don't necessarily mean just CNN and Fox News. I mean Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, you name it, right? The Tumblr, all of these kinds of things. The internet, all of that is media. And media, make no mistake, has a major influence on our students. It's life-shaping. You've got to get that it's life-shaping. And the reason I say that is I'm afraid that sometimes we limit the effect that media has on all of us. We think that it just influences our political views, or we just think it influences our sports preferences. But it is shaping our lives, and our life is made up of several things. It shapes our values, it shapes our attitudes, it shapes our behaviors. All of those things, whether we recognize it consciously or not, are a part of what the media is giving us. And it's not that the media is bad. They're not the evil empire that's trying to ruin all of humanity. It's that we're allowing it to have such a great influence in our life. It shapes things like our values. What do we put priority on? What gets the most of our time? That's a good exercise for you to think about. Look at your calendar on your phone, or if you're still using that paper one, stay strong. But look at your calendar. What gets the most of your time? You're going to start having a really good understanding of what is the value in your family. What are the things that have the most value? It shapes our attitudes, and by attitudes, I'm thinking more of like how we respond to things that we disagree with or that we even agree with. It's how we kind of engage in our reality, our attitude toward it, and then certainly our behaviors, how we spend our money, how we spend our time, how we devote our energy, those kinds of things. Media is shaping all of those. So it really is life-shaping. It's forming us into who we are. There's a generation on the planet now, are you ready for this, that has no idea what it was like to not have cell phones. There's a generation on the planet now that doesn't know what dial-up is. There's a generation now that does not understand the necessity of libraries because everything's there. You don't have to go to some room full of books. Every book is on the internet. I can pull it up right away. There's a generation now that's actually dumber than every generation before it. And here's why. It's scientifically proven. I shouldn't say dumber, but they don't have to recall things like you and I did because it's all on the internet. I don't have to remember the Bill of Rights because I can just Google it real quick and it's right there. You see, our phones and our televisions and our computers, they're becoming our brain. And so our actual physical brain in the youngest generation right now, which they haven't named real specifically yet, their brain isn't developed in the way that ours has been. And so it is, without question, the primary shaping mechanism in our world today. So I'm going to spend the bulk of my time talking about media this morning because I think it has such a huge influence. And understand, I don't want to scare you. My heart this morning is I don't want to I'm going to throw some numbers at you. I don't want it to be all about numbers because I don't want you to just walk out of here overwhelmed and terrified about our world is just going to explode and my teenager is doomed and I hope my kid never grows up because I don't want. That's not my heart. My heart is be aware. Be aware that this is what's going on and take ownership and help us change it. So we'll jump in right away with maybe the most alarming statistic I've heard in a long time. Your student between the grades of kindergarten and 12th grade, senior year, will spend 11,000 hours in the classroom. 11,000 hours. That's a lot. But when you think about this, in their high school 4 years alone, they will spend 10,000 hours listening to music. So in a fraction, if my math is right, it's 1/3, right? Is that right, or is it a quarter? I don't know. But in a very smaller amount of time than their overarching time in school, they're going to get almost as much influence from their iPod as they would do from their teacher. That's influence, right? I mean, when was the last time you were out and you didn't see someone with the white things in their ear? I mean, that's becoming like an attachment to us, right? Everyone's always listening to music. There is no quiet. Now they have made our cars so that you can take your iPod off of the dock at home, get in your car, plug it into your car. When you park, you can plug it into your headphones, and you have music from the moment you get out of bed until you go to sleep. It's always going. So music has this gigantic influence in who we are. It's very interesting. I was just reading, doctors now are actually looking at musical preference in students to help assess their health. Isn't that amazing? Right up there with blood pressure, right up there with cholesterol, right up there with diet and weight, and all of that is what's on your playlist. What's on repeat? Because they've come to understand that so much of our students' emotional, spiritual, even physical well-being is tied to what's pumping into their ears all day long. I think that that's fascinating. When things like that start to happen, we better take notice. We better take notice because something is influencing our students way more than us. And then there's television. This is fascinating to me. I remember in 1996, the average household had 27 channels. That's if you had cable, right? 27 channels. Today, the average household has 96 channels. That's not that long. 1996 was not that long ago, right? And we've more than doubled, almost tripled, the amount of channels that are at our disposal all day, every day. We wonder why no one gets off the couch. Because there's always something on. And sometimes it seems like it's always more interesting than the alternative, right? Duck Dynasty is on, right? I mean, you understand our students spend an hour, sometimes several hours, because it's on all of the time, watching guys with unkept beards blow things up all day. That's our entertainment. They're saturated by media all of the time. And you know what's interesting now is most shows are developing what they're calling dual screen entertainment. And what that means is you're not only watching their show, but you have your mobile device or your computer queued up so that you can be doing things on your computer while you're watching the show. The most fascinating one I've seen is the Conan O'Brien show on TBS. Their mobile app now, if you're watching the show live, it will pick up on verbal cues from your television and bring things up on your iPad as the show goes on. We're plugged in, right? We're getting to the point where there's just all kinds of stuff going on, not separately, but at the same time. I love to watch kids who will have their phone out, they're on Facebook, listening to music in their headphones, and the television is on, all at the same time. we're plugged in. And it's almost becoming to the point where we don't know how to function without it. Case in point, in the average household, the television is on for 11 hours a day. There are only 24 in the day still, which means almost half of the time the TV is on. It's not that we're necessarily watching it, it's that it's on. It's like this security blanket. If you're anything, I'm here. I get this. There's something in me that just wants the TV on. If I'm folding laundry or if I'm, sometimes on my iPad reading the newspaper or whatever, I want the TV on and I'll mute it. But it's like I want the company kind of thing. But what that reveals to me is it's got me, and it's influencing me. If I can't sit in the room without a TV on, it's got me. And that's true of a lot of our teenagers. It's true of a lot of us, right? You're probably already starting to see this isn't just youth culture, this is our culture. Let's go to cell phones. 75% of all U.S. teenagers own a cell phone now. 75%. Remember, teenager starts at 13. So very young kids now have cell phones. And I'm not saying that having a cell phone is bad. What I want to make sure we understand is having a cell phone means that all of the stuff we've already talked about is just all the more accessible. It's always there. I just signed up for Hulu Plus and Netflix, which is awesome because it's saving me money on my cable bill. But what I've realized is TV's with me all the time now. I can pull up Hulu and watch TV wherever I am, as long as I have an internet signal. We've moved away from the compartmentalized kind of scheduled life. Our teenagers don't live that anymore. It's this, everything's in the pot and we're just going to kind of do it all at the same time. Where we used to think, wake up, eat breakfast, catch the news before we walk out the door, go to work, come home, listen to some music while we cook dinner, maybe catch the evening news in our favorite sitcom, then we read a book before we go to bed and we go to sleep. Nope, not anymore. Now we read while we watch and we listen and we cook and we study and we hang out with friends. It's all happening at the same time. That's the culture of today. And again, my heart is not let's be afraid. My heart is let's be aware so that we can understand these things are what's shaping us and we need to engage it. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that's really where we're going to head this morning is not how do we avoid all of this, but how do we engage it? And my primary question, all these statistics are true and real, and we can see how they play out in our own homes. But the question I want to ask you this morning is, whose fault is it? I talk to so many parents who are mad at the media for doing what the media does. That's why they exist. A record label does not open its doors so that it can be mediocre. It opens its doors so it can dominate the market. A television show goes on the air so that it can hopefully become number one. Samsung makes televisions because it hopes that it will be, they're just doing what they're supposed to do. So is it their fault? Is it their fault? Where I've come to understand this best is with my dog. My dog will eat anything that's left on the floor. And I used to get really angry at her because we'd come home and there's a chewed up toy or there's a chewed up crock or there's a, something or other is always chewed up. But I came to this place where I went, okay, I know that dog's going to chew up anything left on the floor. So whose fault is it when I come home and there's chewed up stuff on the floor? Hers or mine? She's a dumb dog. She's just doing what she does. I'm the smart, right, sophisticated human being. I'm the one that should understand, okay, I gotta understand that's the reality and gauge things a little differently. So before I leave, I need to make sure I have stuff up off the floor. I need to put my shoes in the closet so that she doesn't get them. It's my fault more. I think when it comes to culture, specifically media, as parents, and like Brian said, I have 4. None of them are teenagers, but God love them, they're going to be one day. I have to make sure I understand the media shaping them doesn't happen apart from me shaping them. I'm either going to own my ability to shape them or I'm going to submit it to media. I think we need to dispel the idea that we're powerless. I think we need to dispel the idea that there's nothing we can do about it. And the reason we got to dispel it is because it is the reality. 28% of kids ages 8 to 18 report that there's any kind of rules at home regarding the internet. That's a pitiful number. Only 28% of teenagers polled say, yeah, there's rules at my house about internet usage. And when they're 8 years old, no less. What I think is parents have just kind of thrown their arms up in the air and we've gone, I don't know what to do about it. I don't understand it, so I'm just going to pretend that it doesn't exist. And I'm not going to do anything about it. We have to up that number because it's influencing the lives of our students. And in case you were wondering, here are some specifics about how it's influencing our students. Here are all the things on the decline. Depth of relationships. Some of the adults on Facebook are already understanding this, right? The depth of our relationships has moved from you understand who I am to you read what I allow you to understand about me. There's no depth anymore. There's no physical interaction. More and more, everything takes place, relationships take place through some electronic medium. Whether it's texting or FaceTime or Facebook or whatever the case may be, the time we're actually physically in the room with each other has changed. You know, back in the day when I was a little kid and Grandma and Grandpa were still kind of the matriarch, patriarch of our family, we spent so much time at the dinner table together. After Sunday morning church, we all went to Grandma's house. We were all in the same room, and we were all talking, and Grandpa would fall asleep watching the football game, but we were together. Today, we usually leave church, and we're all going in different places. Some to practice, some to work, some to the football game. So, and we're going everywhere. Our physical interactions have decreased at an exponential rate. The time our kids spend outside is going down. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm convinced, and I'm no doctor, but I'm convinced the reason that things like allergies are so prevalent now is because our kids are never exposed to anything bad. They're inside the climate-controlled safety of our home. And again, I'm no doctor. I have no proof for that. But all I can see is the relationship between every time we have food at youth group, I have to make sure there aren't peanuts in it now. I don't remember that being the case when I was a kid. Things are changing. And I see part of that is our kids don't go outside and they don't get dirty and they don't get hurt and they don't, because they're inside plugged into a video game, a TV, a cell phone, or an iPod. The other thing that's down is accountability. I mentioned it with Facebook. There's no more like, is that really who you are? Because of the lack of physical interaction, it's I can tell you who I am, and you have no other means of knowing differently. Because I'm going to tweet what I want you to hear. I'm going to status update what I want you to hear. I'm going to take pictures of things that make sure you think I got it all together. So there's no accountability for who you are outside of those mediums anymore. You get to design yourself. They've moved away. They talk about now you have to brand yourself. You know this is the language now? We don't brand companies anymore. We brand ourselves. So you can sell yourself. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Our hero quality. Wow. Right? The generations that fought in the wars, often the oldest generation that exists today is called the traditionalists. Their heroes were war veterans, people that put their lives on the line and defended our country and all of those kinds of things. Our heroes today, they're celebrities for the sake of celebrity. They've accomplished nothing. They've benefited society nothing. But they're our heroes. Our hero quality has gone down. Our body image has gone down. The most painful thing for me sometimes as a youth pastor is to sit with a young teenage girl and get the sense from her that she thinks she's the most hideous creature on the planet. Because the media has helped her understand that unless you're wafer thin, blonde and blue eyes, you are. That's just becoming how we think. And it's almost like you can't even run from it. For about a year now, I've wanted to get off Facebook and all social media. There's just this part of me that I get sick thinking about it, because it's just one more thing for me to try to manage. 4 kids is enough. I don't need all this social media stuff. But you understand, if I got off of social media, I'd never get a chance to talk to a student outside of this room. You know, when I call a student and I ask them to have coffee or go out for ice cream or whatever, you know what they say to me? What did I do? Did my parents call you? Because, right, physical interaction means trouble. So if I were to get off Facebook, no one ever want to hang out with me. We can't run from it because it's so saturated into how we function, how they function. So I'll sound like a banging cymbal here, but that's why we have to learn to engage it. We can't run from it. The things that are on the up, and these won't surprise you, but things like pornography and sex, through the roof. The number one demographic for the porn industry are 12 to 17-year-olds. They have the highest frequency of uploading or downloading pornography from the internet. It's a $12 billion a year industry. They make more money in the United States in 1 year than NBC, CBS, and ABC combined. It's everywhere. And it's one click away. When we were young, if you wanted to get your hands on that, you had to have a friend who had it, or you had to know someone who worked at the gas station. Now, you can get it and nobody knows the difference. It's a Google word away. False view of reality, right? We've already talked about that with body image, but there's this sense now of I should get whatever I want, whenever I want. You ever heard that from a teenager? By the way, I have a table full of teenagers down here that I hope still love me when we're done. But this false view of reality, this idea of you can do anything you want as long as you put your mind to it. There's a generation that just graduated from college that's found out that's not necessarily true because they can't get a job. And they can't figure out why that's true. The other things that are on the up is this idea of boring life syndrome. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but it's very real. You'll have interacted with it. It's this idea that nothing's exciting. I'm bored. I just want to go to bed. I just got to get out my phone. Right? It's amazing to me. I feel like we could be on a roller coaster at Great America that goes upside down 45 times and like shocks you while you're riding it, and culture today would be like, this is boring. At the very least, it would be like, let's tweet about this. Right? Boring life syndrome. Nothing is exciting anymore, especially if you're unplugged doing it. When we go away to retreats, it's so funny when we say things like, when we get on the campsite, you got to put your phone away. Why? My camera's on there. You can't run from it, right? Because you want them to take pictures and share it with their friends, so they got to have their phone out. It's amazing how this works. Things like violence obviously are on the rise. Things like obesity. Do you know over the last 20 years, childhood obesity has tripled? tripled. Because kids aren't doing anything anymore. I love to sit down with a student who's really into video games, and have you ever noticed this? They talk about playing that video game like that's something awesome. Like, dude, I won the NBA championship this year. No, you pushed buttons fast enough in a short amount enough of time. Oftentimes these kids who they think they're so great at a basketball game can't actually put a real basketball into a hoop to save their lives. But they talk about it like they're a professional. Because that's what they do. And it's not just young kids. It's not just teenagers. God love him. My brother is 22 years old. And he never leaves the basement. He's plugged in all the time. I know a lot of adults who are plugged in all the time. Things like sleep disorders. They found that the glow from our cell phones and our iPads is actually affecting our ability to sleep. It affects our ability to fall asleep and to stay asleep. Because it's not just media. Sometimes it's the things that we engage the media with that are starting to affect us. So I want to come back to this idea of the answer is not to run, it's to engage it. So often we think, because we're fight or flight kind of people, and we hear all these statistics and we go, I can't do anything about that. 10,000 hours, 11 hours a day, I can't do anything about that. Let's just run. Sometimes that's the church's mentality too. Let's create a bubble and get everybody in the bubble and be safe and avoid the world. I don't know that that's the biblical answer, by the way. I think it's to engage it. Godly, engage it. And so I want to talk about just some things I want to encourage you with as you try to engage the youth culture and all the things that shape that culture. Number one is this: think message, not mechanism. Think message, not mechanism. Here's what I mean by that. Don't focus on their iPod. Don't focus on their phone. Don't focus on the TV. Focus on what the iPod's saying, what the TV's saying, and who's on the other line. You got to think about where it's pointing them. Because there are some very, I believe, God-honoring things that can happen through media. Well, so the answer is not, well, I'm just going to take your iPod away because I'm afraid you're going to be too plugged in. The answer is not, well, we're going to get rid of our TV because we can't have that influencing you. The answer is think about what we are allowing to fill all of those things. Think about where it's pointing. It's not about the mechanism itself. It's about the message that the mechanism is sending. Second, think evaluation, not isolation. What you need to learn to do with your student is train them in how to evaluate the things that they're consuming. You can see how these are tied together. Help them evaluate the message. We're going to talk about all the things that are necessary for you to help them evaluate it well. But the idea is don't tell them to just get rid of all that stuff because that's the thing to do. The idea is let's sit down and have a conversation about the lyrics that I just heard in that song you were listening to. By the way, if a student ever tells you they don't listen to the lyrics, you can just laugh because that's not true. So the goal is let's sit down. I want to talk to you about what so-and-so is saying. Or I want to hear what you have to say about what they're saying. Evaluate it together. Don't simply just throw it away. Now, you may come as a result of the evaluation where together you decide, you know what, this isn't something we want. But you're not going to get to that kind of healthy, cooperative, we're going to move past this kind of thing unless you sit down together with an open mind and talk about it. So think evaluation, not isolation. Third, think you first, not them first. You remember that old saying, every time there's one finger pointing back, there's how many pointing at you, how many are pointing back at me? Right? too often what I hear is parents harping on their kids about how their priorities are all messed up, how they just listen to garbage, how they watch garbage, how all this. And I stand there looking at them going, but didn't I go see that movie with you? Or how's it going for you? Are you listening to music that's totally righteous as well? Make no mistake, your student's watching you. And you're a part of their culture too. And what you are going to do and consume is what they're going to do and consume. One of the things I love so much about my dad is he never put a rule on us that he didn't follow himself. When I was growing up, I wasn't allowed to see R-rated movies. I'm not saying that's necessarily got to be a rule in your house, but that was the rule in mine. What I so appreciate about my dad is that he never watched an R-rated movie himself. There wasn't this like, it's okay for me, but it's not okay for you. Because what that tells them is that what you're saying to them is, I just want to control you. This isn't a principle thing. This isn't a God thing. This isn't a being a good person thing. This is just, I want to control you, is what we say to them when, hey, I'm going to throw all these rules on you, but they don't apply to me. No cell phone at the table unless I get an email from work. Right? We have to think you first, not them first. How do I need to live out the things that I want to see in my student? Because you can talk all day long to them, but if they don't see it in you, it's not going to change how they act. Next, and this will go with evaluation, is be proactive, not retroactive. Think ahead. You need to become kind of an archaeologist or an anthropologist when it comes to your student. You need to study up. A lot of the information that I'm presenting this morning has been researched by Walt Mueller and his organization, and we've got some stuff out there by him, and part of that book is a website that is so awesome, where it just kind of helps you with that, helps you know what are they listening to, what are they watching, this is the #1 downloaded song by teenagers, all of this stuff. It's priceless information. We have to be the kind of parents that are always looking at that. Because you're not going to help them navigate it if you don't understand it. If you don't at least have some basic recollection or knowledge of what it is that they're engaged in. Otherwise, you come off as this kind of removed, I just want to make a power play kind of person. Versus, I want to get down in here with you, shoulder to shoulder, and I'm going to raise you up alongside of you. So we have to be the kind of people who are proactive. I'm going to study this. I'm going to listen to it with them. Right? My favorite is when I talk to a parent who's like, I listened to Eminem the whole way to. I love when I hear that. Because you're learning what they're listening to. Because so often we call their stuff garbage and we don't know why. It's just we know that it's not what we listen to, so it must be garbage. But sit down and watch it with them. Sit down and learn to understand. Ask them questions. Not manipulative questions, but just honest questions. What do you think about this? Does this sit well with you? Did you hear what they just said? Does that bother you in any way? And we'll talk about this in the second session. Be willing to just listen to what they have to say. And finally, be patient. It's about patience, not annoyance. It's going to take time. It's going to take time for your student to allow you in, by the way. Because they don't think you belong in their culture. They don't think you'll understand it. Because we've shown them that we don't want to understand it. So be patient as you try to get into that trench with them. Go in slowly. And as you're having the conversations and as you're kind of, what I would say, excavating their culture with them, be patient. It's not always going to make sense to you. It's not always going to feel right to you. They're not always going to be totally honest with you. but it's about consistency. I'm going to keep coming back, and I'm going to love you the same every time I come back. Because over time is when they'll start to let you in. So we have to be patient. But I really want to encourage you. I'm not suggesting we throw all the rules out the door. What I'm suggesting is come to rules together. Help them understand why there are rules. Help them understand why you think what you think. Just like we need to understand the why behind the statistic, you need to understand the why behind the behavior. So we'll move on from media, and we're going to talk about what will probably scare you the most, and that's sex. There's no way around this, okay? There's no way around this. I have to show you some statistics that, are going to hurt, but they're real. And we'll start with this one. 70% of graduating seniors have had sex. It means 7 out of 10 have been sexually active. And now that number is either once or regularly. That's a lot, don't you think? That's a lot of kids 18 who have lost their virginity. And there's a lot of reasons that factor into that. So let's again go to the thing, why? Why is that number so staggeringly high? 70%. I want to start with this. It's postmodern thinking. And the idea behind postmodern thinking is that you have a choice. It's your body, you do what you want. There's no absolute right or wrong. If you're in love and you're ready, then go ahead. That's the message that is everywhere in their lives, right? Think media, think friends, think sex ed at school. It's everywhere. It's your choice. There's no standard that you're trying to live up to or abide by. It's you. You're the standard. So if you think it's okay, then it's okay. That's how postmoderns think. That is youth culture. It's not about what you believe first. It's about who you're with first. And then you can kind of determine how you're going to go from there. Second is they crave intimacy and love. And when I say intimacy, I don't necessarily mean sexual intimacy. I mean they want really deep relationships. And they want them with you, their mom, their dad, their grandpa, their grandma, aunt, uncle. You are still the number one influence in any student's life, and that's according to students. So often our kids go to their high schools and they go to their sports teams and they go to their hangouts after school looking for the things that they are not getting at home. My thing with being a parent, what I've learned is that so often the things that I wish were different in my kids are because of me, not somebody else. I have to take ownership for being the primary influence in their lives. And I'm not saying that that's true of every kid. Are there kids that will have sex in high school, that have an awesome home and have a mom and a dad or a mom or a dad who love them and care for them well? Yes, that's going to happen. But what I've come to find true is that kids will search out what they don't get at home. And one of them is love. And one of them is intimacy in this deep, real relationship. Which leads us to the third, permissive parents. There are parents that are the extreme of we're just going to give you safe sex because we know you're going to do it anyway. There's that kind of parent that's permissive in that they actually give permission to their student. But there are other permissive parents that do it in more subtle ways and maybe don't even know it. They're the parents that are the 72% who don't have any kind of rules at home when it comes to media engagement. That's giving permission to your student, you understand. It's the permissive parents who, when the boyfriend and girlfriend are at the house, don't see any problem with them being in a remote location in the house. Do you want to know some staggering statistics? 50% of those 70% of kids who will have sex before they graduate high school have sex in their home. 42% of them while mom and dad are in the building. We give permission in some very subtle ways. We lack boundaries. And we want to be cool and we want to be fun, and I get that. But we have to own this. Fourth, peer influence. Of course, this is true. This is true in anything we're going to talk about when it comes to culture. Their friends influence who they are. Who they surround themselves influences who they are. You want to know where your kid's at in life? Get to know their friends. Because their friends influence them. Fifth, they're curious because it's everywhere. You can't fault someone for being curious about something that everyone says is awesome and you got to have all the time. Don't be mad at your student because they're curious. And then sixth, it feels good. Because we're a fight or flight kind of people. If they have pain, they're going to try and medicate that pain with something that someone has told them is the greatest thing in the world and is love and is all of those kinds of things. I mean, when you look at that list, you can understand why the number is so high. Because the soil for it is like super fertilized. But again, the answer is don't run. Learn to engage them in it. Don't get angry and big and scary and fearful and run. Learn to engage with your student in the stuff that they're facing. So when it comes to sex, here's my recommendations. Number one, simple. Love your kids. Make sure every single day they know that you love them. Say you love them until they tell you they're annoyed with you telling them that you love them. And it's got to be at a time in the day where it's not like, I'm enforcing this rule because I love you. That's like Spanish to them, and they don't speak Spanish. They don't understand that. It's got to be like, son, daughter, I love you. I'm proud of who you are. And if you have young kids at home, if you get in those habits now, it'll be second nature then. But they have got to know that we love them. And you've got to show them that. It's not enough to just say it. You got to show them that. You got to be there with them. You got to sit down and watch the movie that they want to watch. Let them pick dinner. Let them pick what's playing on the music while you cook. Let them feel like they have a place in your life. That they're not the extra add-on thing that you have to care for every day. So love your kids. Second, teach God's standards for sex. What might be going on in your head right now is, well, I'm not sure what God's standards are for sex. That's okay. What I've learned is the times I learn the most is when I got to teach somebody else. I read a lot of good books because I was going to teach this morning. So if you're determined, I'm going to teach my students God's standards for sexual relationships, then it's going to force you to get into the Word and start learning what those standards are. You got to teach them what those are instead of just coming up with some ambiguous rule. In some ways, you get to blame God, not you. Last, focus on the good in waiting, not the bad in not waiting. Let me explain that. I'm not trying to say be all about the power of positive thinking. What I'm saying is when you study the God's standards for sexual relationships, what you're going to see that he focuses on more are the benefits of waiting. Here's what you're waiting for versus what you're avoiding. And that's what we really need to teach our kids, because hopefully one day they're going to get married for the rest of their lives. And they're going to want to have been looking forward to that, not kind of stumbling and backing into it, right? So teach them the things that they need to be moving toward versus running from. Now, I'm not saying you ignore those things. I'm not saying you don't talk about those things. But focus on the benefits, right? Those are the ways that we can engage them. Those aren't overly complicated. And in that, you can start to develop the rules in your household around things like media and when the boyfriend or girlfriend are over or when the boyfriend and girlfriend go out or whatever the case may be. But at least you'll be coming from this place of, I really want to help you, versus I'm afraid you're going to get pregnant. That's got to be the difference. Finally, as we wrap up, I want to talk about partying just a little bit because I think it's become, unfortunately, secondary too often. When I was in youth group, it was always all about drinking and drugs. Because I started in the youth group in the early 90s, and it was so much about that stuff. And I feel like now, because of media and because of the proliferation of sex in our society, things like partying have kind of taken a back seat. But I got to tell you, they haven't gone anywhere. They're just as prevalent, if not more prevalent. And what's even scarier is that suburban parents think that's an inner city thing. It's not. In some ways, it's more prevalent in the suburbs than it is in the inner city, and we have to be aware of that. The stats I want to show you are taken from the suburbs, not the inner city. 54% of high school students will use illegal drugs. We're talking like heroin, cocaine, that kind of drugs. 54%. 47% will use marijuana. 75% will engage in alcohol. See, it's not gone anywhere. We can't just sweep that under the rug thinking we're focusing on more prominent issues. This is reality. And again, before we go any further, I want to make sure you understand they're learning about this because of us. They're seeking this out because of us. Parents have to learn to engage with their student about this stuff. Now, we'll talk about the whys real quick. They're curious. Just like anything, your student has a natural curiosity about them. You knew that about them from the day they were born. We have a 5-month-old at home, and he's at this place now where everything goes one direction, in the mouth, because he's curious. That's true of us forever. We're always going to be curious. And as teenagers, they're trying to figure out who they are. So they're going to try a bunch of different stuff so that they can start to piece that puzzle together. They're curious. And again, don't get mad at them for being curious. Help them make right choices in their curiosity. Second is peer pressure, of course. Third, it's fun for them. That's one of the things that I've not wanted to say. But that's the truth for them. They're having fun, according to them, right? But they go, well, why do I want to stop this? We have a good time. I got good friends that go there. We're not hurting anybody. To them, it's very fun. It's like when my boys are jumping on the bed. They're having fun. I look at it and go, you're going to fall and break your arm. So when I say stop, they're like, why? This is fun. That's a reason for them to do something. If it's fun, we got to do it. Then there's this, I want to look and feel grown up. And make no mistake, society's forced that on them. Our high school students today have a schedule that I can't even wrap my mind around. We're forcing them to be grown-ups quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. The high school students of today are the college students of 10 years ago. The middle school students of today are the high school students of 10 years ago, which means your third, fourth grader is a middle schooler of 10 years ago, which means your kindergartner is a third or fourth grader from 10 years ago. It's accelerating. And it's not going to be another 10 years before it jumps again. It's going to be 5 years, and then it's going to be 2 years, and then it's going to be yearly, where the expectations and pressure on a student grow. And they're forced to want to be a grown-up quicker, so they want to do grown-up things. They want to feel like they're a grown-up because they're being told they have to do all of those kinds of things. It's available to them, right? I mean, either parents are getting it for them or parents aren't keeping it protected when they're not home. Understand one of the most prominent drugs on the market today are mom and dad's leftover prescriptions. Parents leave them out, students find them, and oftentimes the student's not taking them, the student is selling them. Oh, there's 3 or 4 leftover Vicodin in this bottle. It's been in the cabinet for a couple weeks. Mom and dad won't notice. I'm going to take it and I'm going to sell it. That's real. So it's available to them, so they engage in it. Second is they're escaping. Just like with sex, they're looking for something that's missing, and they're going to go find it in whatever way that they possibly can. So again, not to sound redundant, don't run, engage it. Don't get scared and say, no more anything ever in our house. We're taking all the pictures down. We can't do that. Then we're not engaged. We're not being an incarnational kind of people. Help them learn to engage it properly. And I'm going to fly through these, and I'm going to give you a break. Number 1, look in the mirror. That sounds familiar. I'm trying to say it in different ways. It's got to be about you first. You have to think about your alcohol use. You have to think about your party life and your social life because they're watching you. And sometimes permissive parents are permissive because they're doing it. And the student goes, why should I not do it if mom and dad are? So look in the mirror first. Second, establish rules and whys. The R-rated rule in my house always came with, because there are things in those movies that I don't think honor God. And I don't want you at this point to be exposed to those things before you're ready. Explain them. You might even think, because this is what my dad did so well, I don't want to see those things. I don't want to saturate my mind and my heart with those things. And so as a family, we're going to make these kinds of decisions. Make sure you establish the why behind every rule and explain it to them. I don't care how old your kid is. My 9-year-old son, Jake, follows the rules better when he understands why the rule is there. Next, don't enable them. That seems like common sense, but think through the ways that you're maybe accidentally giving them permission and stop enabling them. Be more careful with the things that are in your house. Be more careful with the things that you talk about and act like are funny and hilarious. Be more careful about the things that are on your TV that you laugh at, or the things that come on the radio that we just think nothing of because we've grown callous to them. Don't enable their behavior. Teach biblical theology. If you're taking notes, I want to throw a few verses up. I'm not going to go through them this morning. I want you to look at them later, but I think these can help shape a biblical understanding of substance abuse in your house. Last year we did a series called I Have a Friend Who ... and one of the ones we did was I have a friend who parties too much. These are the verses we talked about. It's things like, obey the rules of your land. It gets really simple when God says, if the law of your land says you shouldn't drink until you're 21, then it doesn't matter what your theology on alcohol is. You shouldn't touch it until you're 21. Because God said, obey the rules of your land. And then there's things on there about drunkenness and all of those kinds of things. I encourage you to sit down with your student and look at these. And you can say to them, look, I'm not making it up. And I'm not just pulling this stuff out of thin air. I'm trying to teach you what God would want you to know. So there's media, there's sex, there's partying. Again, these are not the only influences on your student's life and their culture, but they're the heavy hitters. They're the things that are everywhere in their life all of the time. And again, the answer is not to run, it's to engage in it. Now, I'm really excited about our second session. I'm going to give you a break, but in our second session, we're going to talk first about how to have really honest, open conversations with your teenagers. And then I suckered 5 teenagers into coming up here, and I'm going to throw questions at them that you submitted with your registration. And I asked them this. I said, listen, the only way I want you on this is if you promise to give the answers that are true, not the answers you think they want to hear. And so you maybe for the first time are going to get a real unfiltered glimpse into the life and mind of a teenager. I'll see you at 10:15.